Let's discuss what it was like growing up with the White Sox as they were winning the World Series with my guest next on Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and contributor for SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the FanSide Network, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already, or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Well, Sean Anderson used to host this very show, but he was just a kid when the White Sox won the whole thing. The same with Joe Binder, founder and owner of SoxOn35th's.com. And as the series of looking back on the 2005 World Series title continues, I wanted to get their view of what it was like to see their team win a title at such a young age. And this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. So first, let's get the host of CHGO's White Sox podcast, Sean Anderson's take of growing up with a championship team to follow.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember the moment of JD hitting the ball right back up the middle, and that's the win that like puts them in the driver position, right? They just need to close out the game and they're World Series champions. And I think that's like the one part of that run that like it doesn't stick out like the Blackhawks Stanley Cup runs, because there wasn't a moment where they faced any trouble. Like a little bit with the AJ drop ball game, because if they lose that game, then they're like really in a hole in the ALCS. But outside of that, like, we just had to wait it out in game 4 against the Astros. JD puts us ahead. He ends up getting the World Series MVP. And, there's the Uribe moment as well. Like there's some real like breath taking moments, but there wasn't a time you broke a sweat. And I think that was the coolest part, was just like, it just dominated. They just ran through the Red Sox, Angels, Astros, and didn't leave a single doubt. And that was probably the coolest point. I remember watching the White Sox parade in the third grade classroom, and we were watching NBC because my teacher, Miss McGovern, her son was a camera operator at NBC. So she was watching the NBC footage and being like, as a White Sox fan, being like, that's my son, and probably just being like so thrilled that her baseball team won a World Series finally in her life, and her son gets to be there working the job. It was a cool moment, just being in that classroom. And I have like two moments. I think like there are moments when people like the TV's turned on in your classroom. For me in third grade, it was the 05 White Sox, and then Pope Benedict, the selection of Pope Benedict, the first time seeing the white smoke. We were watching that on CNN. So those are like the two big third grade television moments for me, were the Sox parade and then the selecting of the new Pope.
See, I love how you shared that, because just running through, especially they just ran through it, they were never challenged. Because I remember I was 20, I was in my mid 20s, and I granted I hadn't suffered like my dad had in terms of a fandom, or probably like how your dad had suffered. There were people that were in pine boxes, going through that 88-year drought. But I remember just being a nervous wreck, because how many times did I see them falter, like in 93 and in 2001 or in 2000, and here you are, you get it like right off the bat, boom. They run, so that's why I'm not being like, wait a minute, because I was a nervous wreck, but then I'm like, being 8 years old, that had to have been awesome, because you didn't really experience that much heartbreak. So you could be like, hey, that was an easy run.
Dude, it was sick. And I was like, I literally was heartbroken from the Cubs. And the first season I get is a World Series where they just dominate. And, there's people, White Sox fans, that had an entire lifetime where they didn't even see their team win a World Series. And my first season is them winning a World Series. So now I'm just worried that this is the only World Series I'll get. Fingers crossed we got another one coming, and maybe new ownership can change that. But yeah, no, I mean, it's a right place, right time, and I'm thrilled that I got that moment, as everyone is. And it's just so cool that whether you went through the trials and maybe they took away the 94 chance too. Maybe you're 8 years old then, like. It's always weird to see just like what your 8-year-old baseball team was doing in that time frame.
Well, and I like that too, how you're sharing this, that you actually had like conscious memories of this. Cause like, for example, I was 3 when the Bears won the Super Bowl. So
Yeah.
obviously there's pictures of me, at like my parents had a Super Bowl party. My dad loves to tell the story about how like that I tried to eat the entire cake that they made and all that stuff, but I have no memory of that. So it's like, yeah, I could say I was alive for the 85 Bears, but
Right.
I'm still waiting for a Bears Super Bowl, just like pretty much all the rest of Chicago is, because I don't remember it.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, I got nothing with the Bears. I mean, I got pain of '06. I got pain of 11 with Caleb Haney. I got the double doink, right? I got all the bad memories from the Bears. So yeah, no positives in that lifetime. And maybe Caleb can throw for 4,000 yards, maybe. But Super Bowl, that still seems a little bit far-fetched for that team.
Circling back though to your previous Cub fandom, because I'm not judging, but when they did win in 2016, were you at least elated? Because I'll say this, it did feel like all the curses then were gone. Like Chicago didn't feel like it was just this championship drought. The only team that wins is Michael Jordan. It felt like everything got lifted because you had the Sox break the streak, you had the Blackhawks break their curse, and then you have the Cubs break their curse.
Yeah, I think it's tough to say. I had two different moments, because I think if you asked me before Game 7 of 2016, I would have been like, no, I want it for the Cubs fans in my life so they can finally get that monkey off their back. When Rajai Davis hit the home run, though, I said the funniest thing that could happen is if Cleveland wins this and the Cubs have to suffer this again. If there's another curse on top of the curse and it's the Cubs that have to deal with it, I was kind of fine with it. Again, my team won the World Series, so I'm not worried about that. So, I think that at the end of the day, like, I'm happy we don't have to hear about the curses, and I think Cubs fans would be pretty unbearable right now if we still had to deal with another curse, and another jinx and another excuse. So the fact that they could just get that monkey off their back, I think it is good for Chicago, like you're saying, because that run in the 10s is awesome too. I mean, you get 3 from the Blackhawks and you get 1 from the Cubs. I mean, those decades like feel very few and far between, and I don't think we appreciated them enough within those decades.
Yeah, and it's just also, you think about it, like, yeah, the 80s, the Bears, you got the 90s with the Bulls,
Mm.
05, you get the White Sox, the Bears somewhat come close, and then yeah, you get that amazing run, and then we're stuck with this type of stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't want but this is a look back show on that type of stuff. Who was your favorite player on that team? Because it's always cool, like, who was your first? I know in the Cubs you said Sammy Sosa, but what about the White Sox other than Frank Thomas?
That one's tough just because there's so many guys that won your heart over on that team. I think in many different ways, like if we were looking favorite hitter, I mimicked Creedy's stance the most, even though I was a lefty. So I loved Creedy at third, and I probably mimicked him the most at the plate when I was playing baseball. Podsednik, I think, was like the most fun to watch, at least as a hitter, because you just always love a fast guy when you're little for some reason. Anyone who, I think, he stole like 70 bases in Milwaukee. I think he stole 50 with the Sox in 05 or something like that. Like, he was always great to watch. And then I loved John Garland. I always thought that John Garland was just going to be like the guy in Chicago. And, after 05, like, you felt like that was going to be the thing. There are the World Series bobbleheads where you got the players like holding the World Series trophy. And they got like the nice World Series logo as the stance. There's like a Burley one, like Contreras one, JD. I have the Garland one. That's the only one I have. So Garland's in there. And then finally, like, the guy that has won my heart over, because it's not just 05, it's Burley. I mean, the fact that, after 05, I was there at the perfect game, that ended up just kind of cementing me as like the biggest Mark Burley fan out there. If someone wants to be a bigger Mark Burley fan, that's totally fine with me. We can all love and appreciate Mark Burley, and it's all just because that guy needs to be in the Hall of Fame. So yeah, I think, Podsednik, Creedy, Garland, and Burley would be my Mount Rushmore. And there's no real wrong Mount Rushmore, I think. If you had Konerko, Dye, Harris, Jenks, that could be a fun.
All right, quick timeout for those listening on Apple or Spotify, but let's get Joe Binder of SoxOn35th's.com's memory of being a kid seeing the White Sox win the whole thing after the break on Locked On White Sox. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is a reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and an industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And think about it. You don't got time to waste going through an automated system. You got to get the job done right. You need the right part. So Supply House wants to make sure you are taken care of. And for the trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of skilled professionals already taking advantage. And now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. And I've been telling my brother-in-law, he's in the plumbing business. Convince your company to use Supply House with all the advantages and great customer service they offer. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms. So make sure to follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. You were obviously a kid in 2005 when this was going on. So from your kid's perspective, how was it to watch the White Sox win the World Series?
I mean, for me, you pick a team kind of out of a hat in a way, and you're just rooting for them this whole way. And to see them go the distance and the way they did it too, in such dominating fashion, every single game, there were times where they were down, but they were never out. They were a relentless team. They always found ways to come back. So just to see the magic that they were able to put out there on the field during that run in October of 2025, it was really fun to watch as a kid. And I mean, it was just incredible. And it's still to look back at it this day and look at the stats behind a run where they went 11-1, the complete game streak, all that stuff. Like, it's still impressive and one of the most dominant runs we'll probably see in a long time in playoff history.
All right. So again, you're 7 years old in 2005 when it happens. I now feel incredibly old right now. But anyways, now, obviously hindsight being 2020, with the current state that they are at now, but when you're at the time and now looking back, do you feel like, hey, this is kind of lucky that, my kind of first go around with baseball and the White Sox win the World Series?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, it's hard not to feel excited about that 2020 team, especially with all the prospects we're getting back in trades. And I think everyone kind of fell into it's World Series or bust with this team. And unfortunately, it just didn't pan out with the guys we had who were part of the core. But I mean, to see how hard it is to actually win baseball games, obviously there are a lot of different factors like Tony La Russa coming in as manager, things of that nature. But I mean, you see how hard it is to win and put out a consistent winner if you don't supplement it with the right talent, the right free agent, stuff like that. So, I mean, it just makes 2005 more impressive, especially when we thought we'd be seeing an extended run of a contender here on the South Side. And instead we're now in another rebuild. So, I mean, it's just the way things work out, but yeah, it's a little unique to look back on now.
Yeah, and now I'm jealous because again, like when I first started getting into baseball, I was about the same age, 6 or 7, but it was in late 1980s where the White Sox were literally in dead last. They had just traded Harold Baines. I remember that was my first heartbreak is, oh my gosh, they traded Harold Baines. Why did they do that? My dad had to explain the whole concepts of rebuilds and stuff like that. And, I'm crying. Obviously, a year later, they go from 90 losses to 90 wins and don't make the playoffs. But because of the crazy, only 2 teams, the 2 division winners make it. So I'm like, when I just heard you, I was like, I gotta zero in on that because that's actually pretty neat for you to have that experience where it's like, okay, you're just getting into baseball. Your favorite team is because, the White Sox in the little league, and a lot of guys, a lot of kids, their first favorite teams are like, hey, I played for this team and that's just really cool that you got to experience that. I'm just sorry that you had to experience then the eventual heartbreak and join us because it would have been nice for your fandom to continue on where, hey, everything's going to be good. They're going to be consistent winners. It'll be like rooting for the Red Sox,
Right. Yeah. No, it's still fun to look back on. I mean, I emulated those guys growing up then whenever I played baseball. Like Joe Creedy was my favorite position player. I played third base a lot, try to be like him at the plate. Mark Burley, favorite pitcher. Although I'm not a left-hander, I like to be like him on the mound. Always worked quick, never wasted time up there. But it's fun because what happened for us and my family is we made it a yearly tradition to go down to Baltimore and then watch the White Sox. So starting in 2006, ever since I was growing up, we went down to every game. I met Hawk Harrelson. Ozzy gave me a lineup card one game. It's just little things like that where it just keeps your fandom going and going, even though I'm so disconnected from everyone out in Chicago. And eventually I get to college, I'm studying communications, and I figured what better time than now to start up a blog and a social media account related to the White Sox. And doing that, it allowed me to build a team of contributors while also connecting with the fans out in Chicago. And now I'm very fortunate to have a great team of people working with me. And we enjoy putting out content all the time now. And I'm able to go out there on a yearly basis and celebrate with those folks that we have running our page, whether it's doing a suite outing or just getting together, throwing a tailgate, things of that nature. It's a lot of fun to really connect with the fan base.
Well, that's awesome that the 2005 World Series can actually have that much of a ripple effect. Because again, you guys do great work, especially kind of having that young, hip voice of the White Sox fan that I really like reading about. So that's just awesome. And none of that, like, I really am actually happy for, like, you just already talking about, like, hey, I got to model some of these great players. Because like when I was growing up, it was Ozzie Guillen. That's all you had. I mean, because again, they traded away most of their guys, and there was, you kind of had to wait for Robin Ventura and Frank Thomas. But like when I was 6 or 7, you only had Ozzie Guillen, and that was it. And he was a great baseball player, don't get me wrong, but you didn't have those like great role models to pick from. Although Ivan Calderon, he gets totally underrated.
Yep.
But again, you still had, like I said, I had to wait to 91, 92 to actually have like, hey, I want to be this guy in the backyard. It was, well, I'm Ozzie Guillen. He's in the All-Star team every year. So that's really neat that you actually got to emulate. So who was specifically your favorite player then on that 2005 team? Who's the guy that you gravitated towards?
It's tough. I mean, I have to go Joe Creedy, and I think at the time it was mainly because we shared the same first name. I think to this day I still have a soft spot for him. I really hate that his career kind of went down the drain due to injuries. I mean, it's one thing that if there's one thing I can change in baseball history, it's get me a healthy Joe Creedy for his full career. But it's really tough between him and Mark Burley. I mean, those two are all-time favorites, and nothing against guys like Paul Konerko, Scotty Pods, Jermaine Dye. Like, I loved everybody on that team growing up, so it's really tough for me to narrow it down, but I got to go Joe Creedy, I think.
All right. What was your favorite moment, and when you can think back to that, when you're 7 years old, you're watching this amazing run? What was your favorite moment there?
I mean, it's hard to sound cliche. I think a lot of people would say this, but Paul Konerko's grand slam followed by Scotty Pod's walk-off. I mean, you can't beat that. But there were so many good moments throughout that whole playoff run where you can look back and just say, like, oh, like ALDS, you had the Red Sox series where they blew him out the first game. You have the scenes in Boston where El Duque happened to pretty much nail that one down. And then you have the drop third strike in the ALCS. There's so many little moments that stand out. But it's got to be the grand slam and walk-off. But a close second would be Uribe's catch, just given the circumstances and how close we were to finally getting our first World Series in however many years, 88 years. So many great moments to look back on. It's tough.
All right, quick timeout for those listening on Apple or Spotify, but I'll get back to more memories with Joe and Sean after the break on Locked On White Sox. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. And I'm using Monarch Money to help me save up for retirement, as I like to avoid working until I'm 75. It can help me save by showing just how much extra I've been spending on, things like streaming subscriptions or ordering takeout. The things that drain your bank account little by little. And I know my wife loves Monarch Money because it's been making budgeting so easy. Her and I can track all our accounts in one place. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. Recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever they get their podcasts, as this show is available on all major podcast platforms. Let's get some more memories of the 2005 World Series run with Sean Anderson and Joe Binder. I don't want to Jensplain, but it was just
Oh,
absolutely nuts.
I know the pain. My dad used to check in on college basketball scores by calling a number and then saying like college basketball, and then the input wouldn't go in, and then he'd have to wait through as it scrolled through all the way down to like Wisconsin's game alphabetically. I could feel your pain, and I know what it might have been like.
Yeah. I got your colleague Adam Hogue. He's going to be on another episode of this series. We talked about it because how he was at Madison and I was in Milwaukee, and it was like, wait a minute, Katsu got hurt, and then you're like, what's wrong with Dustin Hermanson's back? Like, wait, what's going on? And because like even out of markets, it was like to get the out of market package, it was insanely expensive. Although WGN did carry some White Sox games, so I was able to like watch that Dodger series. I remember watching AJ hit the home run in the old 59 unis. The final question, were your parents cool? Did they let you stay up until like 1 o'clock in the morning watching Game 3, or did you miss out on that whole lot?
Oh yeah, no, I watched the Blum home run. I don't think I missed a single moment of the World Series because it was the World Series. I mean, there was not a single way that they were going to tell me no on that day. That was an easy day to stay up for the Blum homer because I even feel like Game 7 went, or not Game 7, Game 4. I'm just thinking of the final Game 4. I feel like that one still was a long game, right? Because it was Bad Key and then whoever started for the Sox.
Big game, like Freddie.
Yeah, right, Freddie. Like Bad Key had like a phenomenal game, but I think he was a slow pitcher. I think that was like a 3+ hour game. So I stayed up for all that.
Yeah, I remember hitting the bars at about 10:30 or 11, and I had to work the next day at like 5 in the morning, and I think I stayed till bar time. But yes, I remember being like, for a 1-0 game, man, this thing is taking forever, and that's the other reason why for anybody that is against the pitch clock, you needed a pitch clock because that World Series game should have been done at like 8:30 with how they were cruising and getting everybody out.
Right, 3:20.
Yeah,
was the game time.
Yes, I remember then. Yes, I would have gone to the bar about 10:30 where I was with just a handful of Sox fans that went to Marquette University that were like, when we all got to celebrate together. But it would have been neat to celebrate with family. So at least you got to probably do that, right?
Well, my family's a bunch of Irish immigrants. So like my mom and dad weren't together. So it wasn't even celebrating with my Sox fans. It was literally just me watching in my mom's room. So no, I mean, I got to celebrate by myself because I was the only baseball fan in the house. So my mom was nice and watched with me, and I think she was excited for me, but she didn't care too much.
This is information I should have gotten before I hit record and not make awkward questions then, so on that type of stuff.
Awkward. It's all good. It's lore.
All right, Sean, you got any CHGO stuff coming up that you want to promote?
We still exist. We still do CHGO White Sox 3 days a week. Sunday, typically Monday and Wednesday or Thursday. Usually the end of each series there will be a podcast, and then that like first game of a series, either that Monday or Tuesday. You can find a live post game show at CHGO Sports, and I'll be the host.
So I like how you brought up that, again, you've developed, the SoxOn35th's. You guys have done tons of cool stuff. The cool thing that you guys did with the Southpaw and the bums, getting that tailgate, that was really neat. But the reason why I wanted to bring this up is it kind of the White Sox winning the 2005 World Series in the age of where social media was just starting. The blogs were just starting. Like I remember literally the first time I ever heard of blogs was my senior year of college in 2004. And, you could get a live journal, that type of thing. Do you think that that's one of the reasons why the White Sox run kind of gets overlooked? Whereas, in 2016, you have the Cubs finally breaking the 108-year record, and the Boston Red Sox, you have all these social, like Bill Simmons that will never let you forget 2004. Is that one of the reasons why you would like hypothesize being more of a new age guy, like being like, well, that's probably one reason why the White Sox 2005 World Series gets overlooked?
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine White Sox Twitter nowadays if this team would go on a 2005 type run? Like, you wouldn't hear the end of it. We have so many great voices and podcasters, bloggers like yourself. You have Sox Machine, the 108ers, Shy Sports Bums. You have so many people putting out a bunch of unique content where if this team made it to the playoffs, let alone the World Series, there'd be so much fun happening on White Sox Twitter. And we got a little bit of a taste of that back in 2020, 2021. But I think if we had a 2005 team, you'd really feel the impact of it and the type of run they were going on in the sport. So yeah, I want to say if we had social media, blogs, podcasts, it would be a little bit more out there, a little bit more prominent to the casual baseball fan, where I think maybe they would appreciate it. I mean, for our page specifically, we're on the younger side of things compared to the rest of White Sox Twitter. I'll admit that. But
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think when you have a mix of fans like us, we're a little bit younger, and then ones like yourself where you've been around a little bit more, you've seen more, I think you get a lot of different viewpoints. And in the age of social media, you'd really feel all impacts of the World Series and that type of run that it would have on you as a fan.
Yeah, and I didn't want to like generation split. I actually wanted to get like, hey, like I got, somebody that actually has like, came a little bit after. I wanted to get that perspective because I do think it's so good because some of the other guests that I've had on during this series, we've talked about it like, hey, we didn't have Twitter. Like I remember I'm like, why is why is he no longer closing? Because I was living up in Milwaukee at the time. So I'm like, why do we need Bobby Jenks to close again? Because you couldn't really get the Chicago Sun-Times, because they really weren't putting a ton of their stuff on the news, on their website because they were still resistant. And like, again, unless you could find a good T1 line, it was like, I can't get that. Where today it's like, everything about every type of prospect, every angle, exactly like when Noah Schultz is going to get, moved to AAA. So it's an amazing time to be a fan, but it is so interesting that back in, even just 20 years ago, it was like, well, unless you literally lived in the Chicagoland area, it was really hard to follow the team. So that's another reason why it's cool that you were able to fall in love with the White Sox because of the World Series, because it was really hard to get a ton of information.
Yeah, it was so tough. And being in Pennsylvania, you're kind of isolated in a way. It's like myself, my mom, and dad. Like we're the three White Sox fans in our family watching this team and following them. And I mean, you try to go on MLB.com, things of that nature. But I mean, back in that time, it wasn't as readily available as like you're mentioning there. So I just think about that. You have so many more advanced stats now too available to fans. You have people tweeting all these things. So in today's day and age, I think it would be a completely different team and how it's viewed by the rest of like the general MLB fan base.
Yeah, and especially too at that time. I mean, stats was still getting poo-pooed. Sabermetrics, there was that huge battle where, no wonder why, the quote unquote nerds of baseball are still so defensive because they went through a ton of basically, shaming where it was like, actually, you know what? Baseball's always been about stats. They put stats on a baseball card. If they would have put war on the back of a baseball card in the 70s, everybody would love war. It's amazing how the game has evolved. And that was probably one of the last runs of a team where it was like, you know what, maybe they didn't really need to use analytics because of how they were just so grindy.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's like the way we view this team, it's the small ball era where you're like bunting a guy over. They were scoring. I mean, it's the little things like stealing, bunting, all those things. It's Aussie ball. So that's how we kind of view it. It's a little bit of a different thing than it would probably be viewed nowadays, but it's interesting to look back on for sure.
Oh yeah, like Aussie ball right now is totally, chastised. Although the only thing that I would say is I would love to see a little bit of Aussie ball implemented when you get a 2-strike count. Like just get on base then. Like I'm not totally I'm against bunting except for it's unless you're in the ninth inning and you're the home team. And after, or again, if there's a chance where you can do a safety squeeze type thing or take them by surprise. But otherwise but I do think some of Aussie ball still has, a place in today's game that I sometimes think that, maybe on the flip side, the modern analytics kind of pushes out. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think there are elements you can take from that, put it in today's game, modernize it in a different way and go from there. But yeah, I think it's definitely a different era back then compared to where we are now with the way analytics has really taken off. So it's interesting to think about. I know our resident nerd Jordan Lazowski would probably have some strong opinions for you there because he's very anti-bunt, but he can probably find a way where you can make it acceptable in certain situations.
Well, and the thing too that I think it was Ozzy said even on the DVD, the championship DVD, I remember Ozzy ball was actually not just like small ball; it was smart ball, and I think that's the thing that is sort of missing in today's game is you are missing a lot of guys that can be situational. And like I've said, like I have no problem, and I know Jordan, I've had him on the show. We've talked about it. Like there's nothing wrong with going for power, but when you get 2 strikes on you, shorten up your swing and just get the ball in play, get the next guy up, and then maybe hit a 2-run homer.
Yeah, just get on base. I mean, we're big on getting on base at SoxOn35th's. So if you can find a way, you'll be a fan favorite of ours.
Yeah, like I mean, that's the only thing too. Like, just looking back at that era, Moneyball was all about get on base, and then
Mhm.
somebody was like, "Hey, let's do OPS." And I like OPS too. I think OPS is more valuable than average, obviously, but it's like why, especially in this day and age with today's White Sox, where they kind of went back to let's just get back to basics, just get on base. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And I'll be back tomorrow with more look back on the 2005 World Series run. Going to have former hosts of the show, Herb Lawrence and Nick Morowski. And feel free to leave your memories of the 2005 World Series at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dub, or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. Have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow.